The complete works of Swami Vivekananda, Jnana Yoga, Chapter 7, God in Everything, Part 1. We have seen how the greater portion of our lives must be of necessity filled with evils. However, we may resist, and that this mass of evil is practically almost infinite for us. We have been struggling to remedy this since the beginning of time, yet everything remains very much the same. The more we discover remedies, the more we find ourselves beset with subtler evils. We have also seen that all religions propose a God as the one way of escaping these difficulties. All religions tell us that if you take the world as it is the most practical people would advise us to do in this age, then nothing would be left to us but evil. They further assert that there is something beyond this world. This life in the five senses, life in the material world is not all. It is only a small portion and merely superficial. Behind and beyond is the infinite, in which there is no more evil. Some people call it God, some Allah, some Jehovah, Job, and so on. The Vedantin call it Brahman. The first impression we get of the advice given by religions is that we had better terminate our existence. To the question how to cure the evils of life, the answer apparently is give up life. It reminds us of one old story. A mosquito settled on the head of a man, and a friend, wishing to kill the mosquito, gave it such a blow that he killed both man and mosquito. The remedy of evil seems to suggest a similar course of action. Life is full of ills. The world is full of ills. That is a fact no one who is old enough to know the world can deny. But what is the remedy proposed by all the religions? That this world is nothing. Beyond this world is something which is very real. Here comes the difficulty. The remedy seems to destroy everything. But can that be a remedy? Is there no way out then? The Vedanta says that what all the religions advance is perfectly true, but it should be properly understood. Often it is misunderstood because the religions are not very clear in their meaning. What we really want is head and heart combined. The heart is great indeed. It is through the heart that come the great inspirations of the life. I would 100 times rather have a little heart and no brain than be all brains and no heart. Life is possible, progress is possible for him who has a heart. But he who has no heart and only brains dies of dryness. At the same time, we know that he who is carried away by his heart alone has to undergo many ills, for now and then he is liable to tumble into pitfalls. The combination of heart and head is what we want. I do not mean that a man should compromise his heart for his brains or vice versa, but that everyone have an infinite amount of heart and feeling, and at the same time an infinite amount of reason. Is there any limit to what we want in this world? Is not the world infinite? There is no reason, no room for an infinite amount of feeling, and so also for an infinite amount of culture and reason. Let them come together without limit. Let them be running together, as it were, parallel lines each with the other. Most of the religions understand the fact, but the error into which they all seem to fall is the same. They are carried away by the heart, the feelings. There is evil in the world, give up the world, that is the great teaching. And the only teaching, no doubt, give up the world. There cannot be two options that to understand the truth, every one of us has to give up error. There cannot be two opinions that every one of us, in order to have good, must give up evil. There cannot be two opinions that every one of us, to have life, must give up what is death. And yet, what remains to us, if this theory involves giving up the life of the senses, the life as we know of it, and what else do we mean by life? If we give this up, what remains? We shall understand this better when, later on, we come to the more philosophical portions of the Vedanta. But for the present, I beg to state that in Vedanta alone we find a rational solution of the problem. Here I can only lay before you what the Vedanta seeks to teach, and that is the deification of the world. The Vedanta does not in reality denounce the world. The idea of renunciation nowhere attains such a height as in the teachings of the Vedanta. But at the same time, dry societal advice is not intended. It really means deification of the world, giving up the world as we think of it, as we know it, as it appears to us, and to know what is really is. Deify it. It is God alone. We read at the commencement of one of the oldest of the Upanishads, whatever exists in this universe is to be covered with the Lord. We have to cover everything with the Lord Himself, not by a false sort of optimism, not by blinding our eyes to the evil, but by really seeing God in everything. Thus, we have to give up the world, and when the world is given up, what remains? God. What is meant? You can have your wife. It does not mean that you are to abandon her. What is meant is that you are to see God in your wife. Give up your children. What does that mean? To turn them out of doors, as some human brutes do in every country? Certainly not. That is diabolism. It is not religion. But see God in your children. So in everything, in life and in death, in happiness and in misery, the Lord is equally present. The whole world is full of the Lord. Open your eyes and see Him. This is what Vedanta teaches. Give up the world when you have conjectured, because your conjecture was based upon a very partial experience, upon very poor reasoning, and upon your own weakness. Give it up. The world we have been thinking of so long, the world to which we have been clinging so long, is a false world of our own creation. Give that up. Open your eyes and see that as such, it never existed. It was a dream, Maya. What existed was the Lord Himself. It is He who is in the child, in the wife, and in the husband. It is He who is in the God, in the good and in the bad. He is in the sin and He is in the sinner. He is in life and in death. A tremendous assertion indeed. And yet, that is a theme which the Vedanta wants to demonstrate, to teach and to preach. This is just the opening theme. Thus we avoid the dangers of life and its evil. Do not desire anything. What makes us miserable? The cause of all miseries from which we suffer is desire. You desire something and that desire is not fulfilled. The result is distress. You desire something. If there is no desire, there is no suffering. But here too, there is the danger of my being misunderstood. So it is necessary to explain what I mean by giving up desire and becoming free from all misery. The walls have no desires and they never suffer. True, but they never evolve. This chair has no desires. It never suffers. But it is always a chair. there is glory in happiness, there is glory in suffering. And if I may dare to say, there is a utility in evil too. The great lesson in misery we all know. There are hundreds of things we have done in our lives which we wish we had never done, but which at the same time have been great teachers. As for me, I am glad I have done something good and many bad things. Glad I have done something right and glad I have committed many errors, because every one of them has been a great lesson. I, as I am now, am the result of all that I have done, all that I have thought. Every action and thought have had their effect, and these effects are the sum total of my progress. We all understand that desires are wrong, but what is meant by giving up desires? How could life go on? It would be the same suicidal advice, killing the desires and the man too. The solution is this: not that you should not have property, not that you should not have things which are necessary and things which are even luxuries. Have all that you want and more, only know the truth and realize it. Wealth does not belong to anybody. Have no idea of proprietorship, possessorship. You are nobody, nor am I, nor anyone else. All belongs to the Lord. Because the opening verse told to us is to put Lord in everything. God is in the wealth that you enjoy. He is in the desires that rise in your mind. He is in the beautiful things that you buy to satisfy your desire. He is in your beautiful attire, in your beautiful ornaments. This is the line of thought. All will be metamorphosed as soon as you begin to see things in that light. If you put God in every moment in your conversation, in your form, in everything, the whole scene changes, and the world, instead of appearing as one of woe and misery, will become heaven. The kingdom of heaven is within you, says Jesus. So says the Vedanta. And every great teacher. He that hath eyes to see, let him see. And he that hath ears to hear, let him hear. The Vedanta proves that the truth for which we have been searching all this time is present and was all the time with us. In our ignorance, we thought we had lost it. And when the world was crying and weeping, struggling to find the truth, while all along it was dwelling in our own hearts, there alone can we find it. If we understand that giving up the world in its old, crude sense, then it would come to this, that we must not work, that we must be ideal, sitting like lumps of earth, neither thinking nor doing anything, but must become fatalists, driven about by every circumstance, ordered about by the laws of nature, drifting from place to place. That would be the result. But that is not what is meant. We must work. Ordinary mankind, driven everywhere by false desire. What do they know of work? The man propelled by his own feelings and his own senses. What does he know about work? He works, who is not propelled by his own desires, by any selfishness whatsoever. He works, who has no ulterior motive in view. He works, who has nothing to gain from work. Who enjoys that picture, the seller or the seer. The seller is busy with his accounts, computing what his gains will be, how much profit he will realize on the picture. His brain is full of that. He is looking at the hammer and watching the bids. He is intent on hearing how fast the bids are rising. The man is enjoying the picture who has gone there without any intention of buying and selling. He looks at the picture and enjoys it. So this whole universe is a picture. And when these desires have vanished, men will enjoy the world. And then this buying and selling and these foolish ideas of possession will be ended. The money lender gone, the buyer gone, the seller gone. This world remains the picture, a beautiful painting. I never read of any more beautiful conception of God than the following. He is a great poet, the ancient poet, the whole universe is his poem. Coming in verses and rhymes, rhythms, written in infinite bliss. When we have given up desires, then alone shall we be able to read and enjoy this universe of God. Then everything will become die feet, nooks and corners, byways and shady places, which we thought dark and unholy, will all be die feet. They will all reveal their true nature, and we shall smile at ourselves and think that all this weeping and crying has been but child's play, and we were only standing by watching.